All right, let's dive in. Today, we're jumping into an article by Ted N.C. Wilson called The Hope of the Ages. It basically looks at our current world through a very specific theological lens and lays out this powerful vision for the future. So we're going to break down what that vision is and why the author thinks it's so important, especially right now.
You know, the article starts with a question that, let's be honest, probably crosses all of our minds at some point. You just have to turn on the news, and it's easy to feel kinda overwhelmed, right? So in a world like that, what actually gives people hope? That's what we're here to explore through the very specific answer this article gives.
Okay, so first things first. To really get why the author is arguing for hope, you first have to see the world from their perspective. And they describe it as a world in some serious turmoil.
So the author paints this picture of our global situation. And it's a perfect storm, really. We're talking unprecedented events, disasters, political tensions getting worse, economic chaos, the whole shebang. But this isn't just a laundry list of problems. For the author, this exact set of circumstances is the critical backdrop for the main argument about hope.
And this is where it gets really interesting. Where most of us might just see chaos, the author sees something totally different. All these global challenges are interpreted as signs, indicators that a huge prophesied event is getting close. So from this viewpoint, the turmoil itself, well, it actually becomes a reason for hope.
So, if all this turmoil is a sign, what's it pointing to? Well, that leads us right into the heart of the article, this idea of a promised hope. And the article is super clear about what it means. The hope of the ages is the literal, physical second coming of Jesus Christ. It's not just described as some important event, but as the single most significant moment in all of history, the culmination of everything.
And this whole idea, it's not just pulled out of thin air. The article grounds it in this very specific promise from the Gospel of John. This verse is presented as the bedrock guarantee, a direct assurance from Jesus himself that he's going to return one day.
Okay, but here's the big question, right? That promise was made about 2,000 years ago. The article jumps right into that obvious tension. If this return is supposed to happen soon, what on earth does soon actually mean?
The author does not shy away from this one. They put it front and center. It's even framed in the context of what they call our Instagram world, where if it is an instant, it feels slow. So how does an ancient promise like this stack up against our modern need for speed?
The explanation really comes down to this massive difference in perspective on time. On one hand, you've got us, the human point of view. We're impatient. We're focused on the here and now. But on the other hand, you have this biblical viewpoint which says that divine time is on a completely different scale. 1,000 years might as well be a single day.
So this completely flips the script on what that long wait actually means. The article argues it's not a broken promise or inaction. No, it's presented as an act of mercy, a form of divine patience that's giving more people more time to, well, get on board. So in this view, the slowness is 100% purposeful.
Okay, so if you accept that perspective on time, then what are you supposed to do while you're waiting? Well, that leads directly to a call to action.
The article lays out a very specific mission. First, it calls on believers to be watchmen and light bearers, basically to stay alert and share their beliefs. A huge part of this is proclaiming something called the three angels' messages from the book of Revelation, which are essentially a final series of warnings and invitations to the entire world before the end.
And the article is absolutely emphatic on this next point. This mission, it's seen as completely impossible to do with human strength alone. It makes it crystal clear that to accomplish any of this, you have to be entirely dependent on divine power, relying completely on Jesus and the Holy Spirit.
So beyond that big collective mission, there's also a very personal call to action. The author encourages individual believers to really work on certain qualities: diligence, endurance, and living a life of holy conduct and godliness. The goal is to be found, as it says, spotless and blameless. This is all about the individual preparation for what's to come.
All of this, the turmoil, the promise, the waiting, the mission, it all builds to the article's grand finale. And what's interesting is it doesn't end with the final argument, but with this incredibly vivid, almost cinematic description of the event itself.
So here's how the scene starts, with this one tiny detail. Way off in the distance, in the eastern sky, a small, dark cloud appears. According to the author, this is the very first sign that the final moment has arrived.
And to make it feel even more real and tangible, the author gives us this very specific size. It's just a tiny speck in the vastness of the sky, about half the size of a man's fist. But
that little speck in the sky? It doesn't stay that way. Not for long. The vision describes it expanding, just rapidly growing bigger and brighter and more brilliant until the entire sky is just consumed in this glorious light. The scale of the scene just explodes. And right there, in the middle of all this light and surrounded by millions of angels, the author draws a really important distinction. The figure who appears is not the humble, suffering servant from the first coming, but a triumphant, glorious king. This is the ultimate reveal, the central figure of the entire piece, Jesus Christ, coming back not as a lamb, but as the King of Kings and the Redeemer of the world.
And this whole incredible vision, it all culminates in this one powerful declaration of recognition and joy. For those who have been waiting, this moment is described as the ultimate fulfillment, the point where all that waiting finally turns into pure celebration.
Ultimately, what this whole article really illustrates is that a powerful vision of the future isn't just about what might happen someday. It's about how it fuels what you do right here, right now. And that kind of leaves us with a final thought to chew on. How does what any of us believe about the future, whatever that belief may be, end up shaping the way we choose to live our lives today?